Welcome to the Daily Word, verse by verse. Grab your Bibles and follow along as we study the book of Galatians. Keep in mind, I am using the Holman Christian Standard Bible, so if you're using a different translation, the read is different, but the message is the same. Also, keep in mind that these Daily Word, verse by verse studies are uploaded to my YouTube channel, BP The Bible Perspective, BP The Bible Perspective. Okay, so we are in the book of Galatians, verse 1. Now, again, the last couple of videos, I did a extensive introduction. And the reason why is because there is a lot that ties into the thoughts of why Paul wrote this letter. And he's going to make it clear as we read on. So verse 1 says, Paul, an apostle, not from men or by man, but by Jesus Christ and God the Father, who raised him from the dead. And all the brothers who are with me to the churches of Galatia. Now remember, notice Galatia was a region, wasn't just a city, was a Roman region, province. Okay, so there were several churches that he was writing this to. And right off, what is kind of interesting is Paul establishes his apostolic authority. Now, if you go back to the last couple of videos when I did the introduction in the book of Acts, we saw where Paul went to the apostles in Jerusalem to resolve a circumcision issue. Now we're going to see this is one of the genesis of that, where it started from, how they got to, the 15th chapter of Acts, that first church council. Also, there were those who were constantly challenging Paul's authority. In other words, there were those who were at Jerusalem who were saying Paul is not a legitimate apostle. Okay? Again, human nature hasn't changed. We do the same thing today. You can have an organization. I can tell you one particular organization that has over 1,000 affiliate churches. And within that organization, people were arguing over who was authentic, who was not. You would say that these people were the first generation people. Well, these people weren't. So, and so it was there, and so Paul is going to do first. He's going to establish his apostolic authority, as well as state why he is writing this, set up why he is writing this. Now, Paul is not saying that he is an apostle as there are some today. It's just a fancy title. People think it's just cute to be called an apostle, which is interesting because he says, Paul, an apostle, not from man, not from men or by man. So today you have people who are rising in the ranks of church leadership by man. One of the easiest ways to get access to the church, go to theological school, get a degree. Another way is give a large donation. You'll get conferred a title, position. You can rise up the ranks. You can play the game of rising up the ranks and you'll get a position, a title. Easy to do. That's the easiest thing to do if you play the game. And so when you see these kinds of elaborate coronations, you see they are concocted by man, from man, for man. Okay? Years ago, I was quite shocked. Now this is probably almost 20 years ago now, where a guy who I highly esteem all of a sudden decided to become an apostle. And then you have to stop and think, well, why in your old age? Why all of a sudden now you're going to become an apostle? So he had this great big pomp. National ministers flew in from around and they coronated him. He had a nice big wooden staff and they put on a nice robe and clerical garb. See, that was an apostle by men. Dude couldn't even explain how God called him to be an apostle. as the story goes, one of his sons in the ministry said to him, hey, you should be an apostle. And he's like, oh, okay, I guess good idea, maybe, And so then from that, they concocted this elaborate, to me, ripped from the Catholic or Greek Orthodox. And they have better services, by the way, better titles too. So, you want to say I'm an apostle, guess what? They beat you. They got titles such as His Eminence, His Holiness, Pope, right? Today you got people now, it used to be you go in some of these churches and some of the people were missionaries. The women, everybody was either missionary or evangelist. The men were bishops and elders and deacons and some kind of minister. There was a time when being just called a minister carried prestige. Now, it's apostle and a prophet. Well, guess what? As these things tend to go, you can be a master prophet and a chief apostle. Like I say, but the Catholics and the Greek Orthodox, they have you all beat out. They have more grand titles. Like I say, His Eminence, His Reverence, the Reverend Right. We can go on and on and on. So Paul is not saying this to sort of brag on a position, but because there were those who were not only challenging his title, they were challenging his office, they were also challenging the teaching and the work that he was doing. So, and let me also say this, Paul is not talking to those who would tear him down or to criticize him. He is talking to the church. And let me just say a quick word on that, because even Jesus would do that. Jesus, when you see his harshest response to the Pharisees, it wasn't trying to convince the Pharisees, but always it was on the behalf of the flock, that because the Pharisees were trying to poison the message and the influence of Jesus to the flock. That's why Jesus would come so hard. You brood of vipers, you snakes, whatever. It was for that reason. Well, the same thing here. Paul is not trying to convince his critics, okay, but the flock. And so he says, Paul, an apostle, not from men, but by God. Now, I'm going to go back. Paul, an apostle, not from men or by man, but by Jesus Christ and God the Father who raised him from the dead. So this apostleship didn't come through Jerusalem, is what he's saying.